This presentation is an attempt to make sense of the mysterious connection between racy paintings of Titian, from the 16th century, and paintings of Édouard Manet, from the 19th century. The paintings under immediate consideration are Pastoral Concert and Venus of Urbino by Titian, and Luncheon on the Grass and Olympia by Édouard Manet. The urgency of this presentation is prompted by continued misinterpretation of those paintings. There are a number of things that are known for certain about those paintings, along with a few things that are strongly suspected and deserve careful consideration. Interestingly enough, none of them were intended to be examples of a nudity for the sake of nudity. This video and the research it is based on are not the product of artificial intelligence or any other automated research and writing tools. The material is new, and not all statements in this video have the same potential to withstand the test of additional research, time and reason. Use at your own discretion. And you know what? All rights reserved. The narrative is heavily dependent on the supplied visual material. Please, do not hesitate to pause the video to get a better look. From past experience it is known that some viewers are irritated by the narrated voice. Please, keep in mind that you can mute the sound and simply read from the slides. The slides will continue to change after narration is finished in the background. I do not have a quality of voice and performing ability to do my own voiceovers. The budgetary considerations are also a factor in the choice of robotic voiceover versus a live one. Questions and comments are welcome. The curious thing about the paintings in question is that Édouard Manet as much as admitted that connection exists. But at the same time, he never cared to clarify the details of such a connection, and over time this connection was downsized to the pure aesthetics and composition while totally ignoring the context. In both cases it is not a correct approach, and this presentation will delve into the complexity and reasoning behind the relation between the paintings. All that said, 4 paintings under consideration are far from unique. In previous presentations 2 other pairs of paintings were analyzed at length. Contrary to the 4 paintings in question, the other 4 were never acknowledged by 19th century painters, and for good reason. First pair is a painting of The Dead Christ with Angels, by the very same Édouard Manet that has obvious connections with the painting by Andrea Mantegna, Christ in Mercy surrounded by 2 angels, from the 15th century. In the presentation dedicated to these paintings it is shown that Édouard Manet did not mention the relationship between the 2 for a very obvious reason. The relation was based on the knowledge of the real mental condition of Jesus, and bringing something like that up for discussion in the 19th century would have caused a stir that Édouard Manet, probably, did not want to deal with. On the sideline, those paintings shed light on the depth of knowledge and training of Édouard Manet in the history of art. He came from a privileged background and had natural curiosity. It is apparent that during his travels and lessons in Italy he was initiated into the knowledge about hidden meaning encoded into some of the paintings of old masters. Another paired painting that was already considered in the separate presentation is Madonna with Yarn Winder, by Leonardo da Vinci, and The Holy Family, by academic painter William Adolphe Bouguereau. Most obvious, but still never acknowledged, it was telling about the dark role of the John the Baptist in the life of Jesus, and doing so in a humorous way. Mary is probing the spool, 19th century equivalent of the yarn winder, to see if it is sharp enough to stab child John the Baptist with it. Having Leonardo da Vinci as a starting point hints that information could have come from the French government that was in possession of the real story of Jesus, handed over by Leonardo himself. Emperor Napoleon III himself once owned the painting, The Holy Family. While the original idea was to do a comprehensive presentation, the volume of material pushed for the decision to have it split into 2 manageable parts, and this is the second part that is dedicated to Venus of Urbino and Olympia. The first part was about Pastoral Concert and Luncheon on the Grass / Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. Before we move any further with Titian and Édouard Manet, there is a need for a better understanding of the cultural phenomenon of in memoriam painting. People were sentimental, and those who can afford it, a tiny well-off minority, commissioned paintings with the likeness of recently deceased loved ones. With time the tradition produced very elaborate paintings. In my opinion, the tradition was so prolific that it makes sense to analyze any unknown portrait or mysterious painting as a possibility of being in memoriam. The most famous example of mysterious in memoriam painting is the Arnolfini portrait. Curiously, the final proof that it is indeed in memoriam painting was obtained in the course of this work. Two people in the mirror/passageway to the underworld are two angels of death borrowed from Islam and clearly depicted by Andrea Mantegna in The Dead Christ with Angels. That is, in addition to the extinguished candle, green dress, no longer needed footwear, let go hand holding, gaze of the light, and even an independently existing letter mentioning the death. Curiously, we do not know if the theological borrowing was considered serious or if it was a joke or superstition of sorts. We only know that absence of clarity in Christian ideas about death as a process left much to be desired, and Islamic theologians did fill the gaping hole in Christian theology in however way they could. Another interesting detail is that painter, Jan van Eyck, was actually invited when the woman died and made the painting from his own personal recollections and sketches, assuming that he made them. He included the inscription about that in the painting. It is hard to come up with an exhaustive explanation why in memoriam paintings were so popular, probably more than portraits, but it could have something to do with perceptions of modesty and avoiding accusations of vanity in those days. Yet another kind of in memoriam paintings known to exist. This slide provides examples, but the material on this slide is highly speculative. In memoriam painting could be made by converting existing portraits, or making a copy of existing portraits, and adding characteristic details. The portrait of Sir Thomas More, by Hans Holbein, is one of those. The green curtain is a sign that he is dead. Green is probably associated with a grassy surface of the graveyard. But most remarkable are his sleeve covers/protectors, not unlike those worn by men for centuries. They are red in color. If something in the painting is red, it is probably signifying a cause of death. Thomas More was executed by the king, and foremost for his writings. He was a prolific writer, and people who wrote a lot wore sleeve covers. Showing them red is an allusion to his writings as a cause of his death. Portrait of an unknown lady on the right is also in memoriam. There is a green curtain that is a sign of it. But there is also a red chest shown. This can be an allusion that the woman's dowry was the reason for her demise. Dowry was held in trust, but if the wife was no longer in the picture, alive, the widowed husband could use the money with much less restrictions. On both of those paintings the person is depicted with much attention and detail, and I consider them to be conceived as a portrait of a living person converted into in memoriam painting when the person died. Portrait of a lady, circa 1530 to 1540, oil on poplar panel, 113.7 by 79 centimeters, Stadel Museum, Frankfurt, Germany, attributed to Girolamo da Carpi, Italian, 1501, 1556-57. Now we know just about enough about in memoriam paintings that we can return to the consideration of Titian, who was one artist to go to if anyone was looking for such a painting to be made. The next slide will show the level of his creativity in his craft. Another necessary highlight for the arguments of this presentation is the creativity of the painters, and Titian in particular when working with the customer's ideas. In the recent article in Smithsonian there was the story of the discovery that Titian's Ecce Homo is painted over the portrait of some unknown man. That is a unique reflection of Titian's creative process when working for some very unusual customer. The resulting painting, known as Ecce Homo, is not a religious painting. It is a painting in memoriam that is camouflaged as one. It is an interesting contemplation how the paintings in memoriam come out to be. The painter either had to know the depicted person when that person was alive, not unusual but rare, or the painter needs to be invited at the time when person is dying, just like Jan van Eyck indicated he was on the famous Arnolfini painting in memoriam of the wife and commissioned by grieving husband. There are a couple other possibilities, however. The painter might use previously made depictions of the deceased person, or, in very rare instances, convert existing or unfinished painting of the person while he or she was alive into the painting in memoriam. That is most likely what we see when researchers discovered an existing painting overpainted by Ecce Homo. Some distinguished gentleman ordered a portrait from Titian and work was underway. Very soon after, the very same gentleman fell out of favor with people in power, and was accused, convicted and executed. It is very natural that a family members wanted to have his in memoriam painting. Titian wasted no time and converted an already existing painting into an in memoriam one, added a red/green curtain and finished the details. Somewhere along the way, patrons realized that displaying a picture of a recently prosecuted family member is unsafe and could cause repercussions. They voiced their concern to Titian, and he obliged. He overpainted almost finished standard in memoriam painting with the scene from the John 19 verse 5 while giving Jesus facial similarities with the deceased gentleman. That also highlighted association with unjustly accused and executed Jesus. Religious painting was safe to display while serving as in memoriam painting of the loved one. The clothing of Pontius Pilate alludes to Poland or Hungary as a possible location of the contemporary drama that Titian was a part of. This slide is an illustration of the important concept. There could be more than one in memoriam painting of the same person. I did not do exhaustive research and I still do not know who the person was, but there could be more than one household with resources to afford painting by Titian and his studio in remembrance of the friend or relative. Once a solution was found, Titian reused it several times. Thanks to the internet, we can see them all side by side. The one on the right is now in Prado, Madrid. The one in the center was considered a work of Titian's studio and was sold at Christie's in New York in 2019. The one on the left is in the St. Louis Art Museum. Moreover, when an impressive, powerful image is found, mostly by trial and error, it can be reused as an independent subject of a painting. Regardless of the fact that Jesus never got to be as old as the man in the paintings by Titian and his studio. It is very clear that someone from Titian's studio tried to make Jesus look younger in the painting in the center. That painter removed the bagging under Jesus' eyes and made his face and body more sculpted, looking younger than the man in question. Now we know enough to approach the famous Venus of Urbino by Titian. This is one of the most misinterpreted paintings in the whole world of fine art. Titian was a go-to artist when survivors wanted to have an in memoriam picture, especially a cryptic one. It goes without saying that he knew many customers while they were still alive, and he was a master of reconstructing the image of a deceased person from already existing depictions, if any available. On another hand, Titian was a very creative artist, and his creativity mystified art critics and the general public alike for centuries. He also was apparently not boastful and could keep the secrets. It is absolutely not true that survivors always wanted a dignified, somber depiction. Sometimes being in possession of the portrait of the person who was considered dangerous in his or her lifetime was also problematic. Titian was a master of heavy camouflage that helped to eliminate such concerns. Arguably, Venus of Urbino is by far the best example of Titian's handiwork. Below is a historical curiosity about how Venus of Urbino made a fool from none other than famous American writer Mark Twain. Mark Twain on the Venus of Urbino in his book, A Tramp Abroad. At the door of the Uffizi, in Florence, one is confronted by statues of a man and a woman, noseless, battered, black with accumulated grime. They hardly suggest human beings, yet these ridiculous creatures have been thoughtfully and conscientiously fig-leaved by this fastidious generation. You enter, and proceed to that most visited little gallery that exists in the world, the tribune, and there, against the wall, without obstructing rag or leaf, you may look your fill upon the foulest, the vilest, the obscenest picture the world possesses, Titian's Venus. It isn't that she is naked and stretched out on a bed, no, it is the attitude of one of her arms and hand. If I ventured to describe that attitude, there would be a fine hull, but there the Venus lies. For anybody to gloat over that wants to, and there she has a right to lie, for she is a work of art, and art has its privileges. I saw young girls stealing furtive glances at her, I saw young men gaze long and absorbedly at her, I saw aged, infirm men hang upon her charms with a pathetic interest. How I should like to describe her just to see what a holy indignation I could stir up in the world just to hear the unreflecting average man deliver himself about my grossness and coarseness, and all that. The world says that no worded description of a moving spectacle is 100th part as moving as the same spectacle seen with one's own eyes, yet the world is willing to let its son and its daughter and itself look at Titian's beast, but won't stand a description of it in words. Which shows that the world is not as consistent as it might be. There are pictures of nude women which suggest no impure thought. I am well aware of that. I am not railing at such. What I am trying to emphasize is the fact that Titian's Venus is very far from being one of that sort. Without any question it was painted for a bagnio, and it was probably refused because it was a trifle too strong. In truth, it is too strong for any place but a public art gallery. Titian has 2 Venuses in the Tribune. Persons who have seen them will easily remember which one I am referring to. And yet, in spite of the outrage of Mark Twain, and very uneasy feelings that Titian himself experienced towards a very unusual subject of his painting, the Venus of Urbino was a real person. She was a friend, relative, lover, mother and grandmother. She had a fame that reached far beyond her immediate family circle. The customer for this particular painting most likely was not one of her children and grandchildren. The customer was a wealthy patron who wanted the likeness of that notorious woman in his collection. It is not the only one in memoriam painting of this woman. At this moment there are 5 paintings by Titian that are in memoriam to her, and there is only one that is suspected to be done without a patron in mind. All in all, she is one of the most depicted women of Renaissance. Even so, her memory and paintings of her were subject of erasure from human history for centuries. Only now she is making her way back to the history books. Felice della Rovere, illegitimate daughter of the Pope Julius II, lifetime companion of painter Raphael and many, many other things, is the subject that is depicted in this painting. There is an interesting problem with Titian depicting Felice, even after her death. It is somewhat obvious that Titian did not like his subject. Felice was loved and greatly admired by Raphael. She was sculpted by Michelangelo. Giorgio Vasari considered Felice a second mother, and Paolo Veronese adored her a great deal. But depictions by Titian, as scandalous as they are, poised to do the most to return Felice to the place in human history where she rightfully belongs. As for Titian, he considered Felice a seductress. Just look at her, drunkard and murderer. And 2 out of 3 faults of Felice are in this painting. Paradoxically, Felice and Titian were on the same page about what is important, but their approach to life could not be any more different. The first thing first, and the next slide will show how Venus of Urbino came to be. It is a good question if Titian ever met Felice della Rovere when she was alive, but he most definitely did not see her naked. It is Raphael, her lover and father of 2 out of 6 children that she had, who drew her and their baby many years before Titian did his Venus. What Titian did, he turned a standing woman into a woman longing on a bed, and a great seductress was born. Titian gave Felice a bit more mature face. She was a teenager when she and a baby were depicted by Raphael. This is a very unusual choice of a prototype depiction from her lifetime, achieved 2 goals simultaneously. Titian gave his subject an unrivaled notoriety and a highest level of encryption. Most obviously, nobody knew Felice when she looked like this, aside from a handful of aging contemporaries. To preempt concerns, Raphael's sketch is known as Leda, but it is obvious that Goose/Swan is a later inclusion/afterthought that has different quality and intensity. That drawing was always considered to be after Leonardo da Vinci, but I think it is the other way around. Also, Leonardo's Leda is now lost. That would be not the only time when Felice is suspected as the subject of the painting. It would be miscategorized and lost, including one that resurfaced recently. For the record, the next couple of slides will showcase the depictions of Felice that are rediscovered now and could have been overlooked or rejected by Titian in his time. What we can observe on this slide is a transformation in the appearance of Felice della Rovere, Raphael's girlfriend and baby mama. In the 2 pictures on the right, Raphael drew her with a more developed breast consistent with pregnancy and childbirth. On the picture on the right, Raphael shown Felice in the company of a toddler, and she is remade into Leda, now in Royal Collection Trust RCN 912759, picturing himself as a swan, negligently looking like a domestic goose, she is real royalty and he is only a prince of painters. This lineup also shows that Felice liberally used cosmetics and hair coloring to enhance her appearance. Her hairstyle also changed over the years. Titian did not want to use any of those pictures. It should be noted that to the side where the baby is, by standing Felice's right leg, is her undone hair. In Venus of Urbino, Titian repositioned her undone hair to the front of the depiction and made it shorter. But this slide shows only a part of Felice's astonishing pictorial. Here are another 3 depictions of Felice that Titian rejected. 2 paintings from the previous slide are included to underscore that this is the same woman. But at the second glance it looks like Titian did make a use out of the image on the right, known as Portrait of a Young Man, circa 1515, oil on panel, 44 by 29 cm Museo Thyssen-Bornemisza, Madrid, by Raphael. It is obvious that Titian was not able to use any of these 2 depictions. Felice della Rovere for a long time considered to be the subject of an unknown man's portrait. It is also a mirror image of the pregnant woman on the fresco, School of Athens. At first, the image in the School of Athens was suspected to be related to Felice's pregnancy in 1503 or so, but that was probably incorrect. Felice's son Girolamo was born July 7, 1513. It is now more reasonable to suspect the image on the School of Athens to be related to that pregnancy and that Raphael was the father. Pope Julius II, who forced Felice's marriage to Orsini, died in 1513, but was very ill since 1512, and Raphael and Felice, obviously, reunited. The next slide has yet another 2 paintings that were available to Titian and a reason why he could not use them. It was suspected for some time that the end of Christianity as a religion came when Felice della Rovere, a woman devoted to intellectual resistance, shared newly systematized knowledge with her father, Pope Julius II. That theory was bound to remain a speculation if not for the surprising report of the contemporary. An enigmatic painting by Andrea Mantegna is a snapshot of historical exchange. Her bravery was for the ages as she did not know if she would come out alive. Christianity became a conspiracy, and humanity entered the age of Felice. Making of the Venus of Urbino. Raphael plus Raphael equal Titian, Venus of Urbino. Titian's approach to depicting Felice is not loving or gentle. If anything, she knew what she wanted, in life, in art, in love and in the history of humanity. I do suspect that she fascinated and terrified Titian at the same time, even dead. The reason could have been their very opposite relationship with Jesus. Titian loved Jesus and felt sorry for him. Felice knew that Jesus was irrelevant and was at the core of her personal problems: loveless marriage, inability to get divorce, preventable death of 2 out of 6 children that she had. There will be no elaboration or reasoning why conclusions above were made, just for the sake of brevity. It is possible that Titian faulted Felice for the death of Raphael as well. There is a separate presentation about that. The patron, customer, could have played a role. But most obviously the customer did not ask Titian to produce this painting just because he or she simply disliked Felice. They ordered the painting to have a memory of her. Some details have parallels in other in memoriam paintings. The green curtain is a symbol of death. Little dog is a symbol of devotion to Raphael. The dog is asleep, which means that the devoted person, Felice, is now dead. 2 female figures are life markers of Felice, from a young and confused woman who just lost her child and was coerced into a loveless marriage with a stranger, to a princely figure in her own right. The half window is an allusion to the School of Athens by Raphael. Venus of Urbino was created in 1538, about a year after the death of Felice. While the nickname of Urbino is commonly connected to the long-term owners of the painting, a branch of the Rovere family from Urbino, Raphael called himself Urbinas in one early work. The roses in her hand are turning red by the blood of Venus, according to ancient legend. The red sofa, together with roses, are an illusion that Felice was murdered, probably, just like Raphael, by the means of poison. Fourth panels, in the corner, is an allusion to 4 children of Felice that survived to adulthood, out of 6 she had. Following his own ideas about Felice, Titian depicted Felice in her In Memoriam wearing the murderer's red dress. 2 fur pelts on her shoulder are actually an allusion to the death of 2 Orsini men, word play, Ursinus, bear. One was her husband and another was her stepson. From the historical understanding, Felice did not seek their death. She gave each of them a generous offer: leave me alone, get out and stay out. They did not take that advice seriously, and Felice responded with creative and merciless self-defense, and they ended up dead. Felice was never formally charged, but paid huge bribes to make the accusations go away. Below is a demonstration of panels on the wall standing for people. In Leonardo's Last Supper, 8 panels correspond with 8 men who are not under their commonly perceived names. 3 windows are for Jesus, Judas and Peter, who are under their own names. There are 2 women at the table at Leonardo's Last Supper, but they are excluded from the panel count. Titian made one panel half as wide as the other 3. Could be an allusion that Felice has 3 sons that survive to adulthood and 1 daughter. The half window is an allusion to the window from the School of Athens, and implies that Felice was a co-creator of that fresco, along with Raphael. Window from the School of Athens, by itself, is an allusion to both Leonardo's Last Supper, with 3 windows, and Mona Lisa, as she was flanked by the columns. The connections between those 2 is beyond the framework of this presentation. As for the dwarf tree/myrtle in the pot, it probably means something, but I am not sure what it is. As for Titian, he could not get enough of Felice. In the second, out of 5, post-mortem painting, her green overcoat is the sign that she is dead, her left, sinister, hand have fingers folded in the sign of the devil, with horns. Just like a sign made by Mary, mother of Jesus, in School of Athens. As for the other 3 In Memoriam paintings of Felice by Titian, their reasonings are beyond the scope of this presentation. As a side note, identical earrings and a bracelet are shown. Simultaneously to this work, the 4th and 5th In Memoriam painting of Felice della Rovere by Titian has been identified. 4th one is an obvious mirror image, with a twist, of a work by Sebastiano del Piombo. Venus with the Mirror, number 4, circa 1555, is Titian's final attempt to wrap his mind around the most remarkable woman of his time. All 5 are wearing the same pearl earrings and bangle bracelet. Also, Andromeda has the bracelet replaced by a chain that restrains her. It takes a lot to fascinate an artist like Titian for the whole lifetime. But now it is 5 as the so-called girl in a fur, obviously, just like the second one. It is obviously impossible to point out how Édouard Manet found out the well-hidden truth about Venus of Urbino. He probably knew the right people and had money to compel them to tell the story. For centuries, intellectual underground kept track of paintings related to the Verrocchio/Da Vinci project about the sinister beginnings of Christianity. Personally, I cannot point to the person in charge of preserving knowledge beyond the lifetime of Giorgio Vasari, and I am not aware of any details about organizational structure. Just like with Pastoral Concert, Édouard Manet used Titian's work only as a general guidance and a source of intrigue. One more time he engaged in mind games and mystified the public for 1.5 centuries as a result. The complexity of his intellectual joke is on such a level that there is a reason to suspect involvement of Émile Zola, who was a writer and Édouard Manet's close friend. The resulting painting, Olympia, has deep roots in literature and theater, the subject that Émile Zola was very well versed at. It feels beyond a coincidence that within the casual portrait of Émile Zola by Édouard Manet is a small reproduction of the famous painting. Getting a portrait done by Manet would be a big deal, even for Émile Zola, and it is highly unlikely that he would agree to include a reference to a scandalous painting, unless there was a good reason for that. This is yet another mystery that would need to be solved someday, but for now the suspicion is all what exists. It is not a suspicion, however, that Olympia has nothing to do with Felice della Rovere directly. It is, however, easily related to the Venus of Urbino. It is very obvious that Édouard Manet undertook an effort to make sure anyone can say that paintings are related. The most obvious is a general composition and posture of a naked woman. There is a green curtain, an important detail, an illusion that depicted person is dead. There is a red fabric of the bed seen from under the pulled bedding. It is an illusion that person that is depicted is suspected to be murdered. Curiously, the red panel, wallpaper, behind the woman in Olympia, carry the same meaning, allusion to murder. It is obvious that Manet included pulled bedding just to make his painting to look similar to Venus of Urbino. There is no suspicion of murder in Olympia, it is known for sure that the woman was murdered. Titian was not so sure about what brought down Felice, also Felice definitely knew too much, so to speak. Another connection is jewelry, bracelet and earrings. Woman depicted in Olympia was not known to own any, but Édouard Manet shown her wearing it just to make yet another undeniable connection to the Venus of Urbino. As for Felice, she was very rich at some point of her life. It is possible that she owned such a jewelry and was famous for it. It can be posted on the level of speculation as there is no definite record about it. Titian included that set of jewelry in all 5 of Felice's in memoriam paintings, probably as a way to underscore connection between them. That said, it helps to remember that it was not necessary that person depicted in the in memoriam painting owned all the things she or he was shown wearing. It is a painting and some embellishment was acceptable. All in all, general composition, death, jewelry, cat versus dog game, and intricate division in 3 parts, about it later, is a glaring show of intention to invoke desired association. It is also an invitation to take another look at the Venus/Felice who was almost totally forgotten by the time Édouard Manet painted Olympia. There is one little detail that demonstrates mastery of both artists in their intricate messages. When she was young, Felice della Rovere had very long hair, neatly done for public appearances. Titian could not accommodate it, and gave his Venus a shorter, more lively and practical hair. As for Édouard Manet, his goals were very different. It could be that he wanted to include a subtle connection to the real Felice, separate from the superficial and obvious connections to the painting Venus of Urbino. Manet's Olympia has long hair, almost as long as Felice. While Titian used Venus's hair to underscore that she is timeless, as Felice really is, Édouard Manet used Olympia's hair to underscore that his personage is most likely dead. Most women with long hair would not lay or sit on it out of the obvious caution not to pull it with the slightest movement. Manet's Olympia is laying on her undone hair. Should she try to get up from the bed, she will hurt herself. This way Édouard Manet alluded that she will not get up, she is dead. But Édouard Manet's game with Olympia's hair does not stop there. What looks like her hair from a distance looks very different from the up close. What looks like a red splotch from a distance turns out to be her hair. And what about long hair she is laying on? That could be tassels on the blanket, at least they look somewhat like those that are in the lower right corner. There is a subtle difference in execution, however, and I think that is to keep the intrigue going. What Manet intended to look like the end of the hair does not have a border or outline that is technically necessary to make a blanket with tassels, a separately manufactured ornament that's sewn, attached to the edge of a blanket. Up and closely the hair of Olympia is a part of a whole separate illusion. Together with a flower bow it creates a Spanish look to the woman. It is not just any Spanish woman, it is Carmen. Not from the opera by Bizet from 1875 but from the novel by Prosper Mérimée from 1845. And Carmen, as it is known, was killed by the jealous lover by stabbing. No wonder that Olympia's hair looks covered in blood. A few words need to be said about division of the painting into 3 parts, bed, left part with the woman and the right part. Right part in both paintings is dedicated to the cause of death. Titian's message in his Venus of Urbino is simple. Whole life of Felice was the reason for her, allegedly untimely, death. Suspicion of assassination could not be confirmed at the time of this writing, also highly probable. As for Édouard Manet, he faithfully followed the design ideas of Titian, followed to the point of including a wide gold tone line to emphasize the separation into left and right parts. It is no surprise that in Édouard Manet's painting the right side also represents the cause of death of a woman, and what is hilarious, there is not a single doubt about it, even so it is not a real-life drama. Another interesting tradition reused by Édouard Manet is an anthropomorphic animal. Dog in the famous Arnolfini painting and the dog in Venus of Urbino, symbolizing devotion, and both have fleeting facial similarities with a devoted person in the painting. Playfully minded Édouard Manet included a cat in his Olympia. The cat is black and the cat is depicted looking sideways, the same way as a black person in the painting. In old paintings a cat very often stands for the presence of devil or evil in general. In Olympia, the cat, a humorous opposite to the Titian sleeping dog, is wide awake and agitated. Getting a little ahead of the story, and it is not about Carmen, the cat in Olympia stands for jealousy with dire consequences. A very pivotal question is the identity of a black person. Édouard Manet, for nefarious reasons, and to have more fun from the confusion, identified the person as a maid, a woman loosely based on one he painted not so long before, and whose likeness is on the painting known as La Negresse. Curiously, close examination shows that those two are totally different people that probably came from the different parts of Africa. Shape of the nose, size and positioning of the eyes, size and outward position of the ear are all different. It is not the same person. Even closer examination allows one to notice the sideburns, a fashionable feature for men but highly unusual for women. The earring is not a usual piece of jewelry, but rather some kind of African ornament that is known to be worn by chiefs or warriors. There is also a male baldness pattern that is depicted by Édouard Manet. The identification of the black person as male is not terribly original. Newspapers at the time when painting was first exhibited noted that opinion, also it looks like Édouard Manet denied it. The person is wearing an outfit that could be a unisex nightie, or could be a dress that a female servant is wearing. The headgear deserves a special mention, and it looks like keffiyeh, traditional Arabic headdress, for a man. It should be noted that this kind of headdress is furnished from a square scarf. It sure may as well be a woman's headdress. All in all, visual clues allow a suggestion that the person is a man. In the context of a painting that would be a secret lover of the woman who lives with her but posing as her maid for outsiders. Assuming that the black person is a man and a secret lover of a woman has a visual base but, curiously, does not resolve inconsistencies within the understanding of the Olympia painting, it multiplies them. If the person is a man, receiving a flower arrangement from some kind of new suitor would have caused jealous feelings in him. On another hand, Édouard Manet represented his painting as a depiction of a courtesan, maybe a high-level courtesan. For those who do not know, courtesans are making a living by being a subject of attention of wealthy patrons. The secret lover of the courtesan expected to be accustomed to the situation to a degree. His jealousy would come across as pathetic. Another question: if a courtesan can afford the kept man, who obviously cannot work while posing as a maid? Yet another question that begs is how men who are her professional acquaintances would fit in the picture. The courtesan could not possibly expect all of them to be that stupid, short-sighted, and unobservant. In the light of all of that assumption that Olympia is a depiction of a courtesan, as Édouard Manet himself posited, and her secret African lover who is getting jealous is preliminary at best and mistaken at worst. There is, however, a light at the end of the Olympia tunnel. There is an interesting detail on the neck of the woman. In modern English this kind of adornment is called choker. I am not aware if 19th century French has an equivalent term. The name, most obviously an allusion to a tight fit around the neck, not to the possibility of choking hazard. That item, however, allows me to introduce the illusion of possible choking, or asphyxiation, that Édouard Manet incorporated into his painting. Another item that pairs with the choker is an already mentioned headdress of the black person, resembling a keffiyeh made of square scarf. The whole set of clues, white woman, black man, jealousy, the fact of asphyxiation and a headdress made from a square piece of fabric, handkerchief, not scarf. Point in one and only direction. Édouard Manet encoded Othello by William Shakespeare and made it set in the Paris setting of his time. In the Othello, Desdemona put the handkerchief on the head of her husband by herself to ease his headache. He lost it, and the man who Othello suspected to be a new love interest of his wife found it, and Othello's jealousy went into overdrive when he noticed his assumed rival in possession of the very same handkerchief. Othello choked Desdemona in a jealous rage and killed himself after that. According to a writing style of William Shakespeare, no survivors. The curtains/wallpapers behind the personages of the Olympia confirm this hypothesis. Red and green for the woman means that she is dead and murdered, just like Desdemona in Othello. Green curtains behind the man are a sign that he is dead too. Double green is possible for suicide, but it is not a tradition, could be an invention introduced by Édouard Manet for the occasion. All of the narrative from the previous slide fits snugly into context of the Olympia painting. It should be noted, however, that Édouard Manet comes across as somewhat cynical. On another hand, the Othello-related narrative is not helping to resolve a dilemma that comes from considering a woman as a courtesan by her primary occupation. But Othello is a play, and play is another clue towards the place where plays are staged, a theater. And in the theater, the most fascinating part of it is the actresses. Édouard Manet did not depict the mourning of a courtesan. He depicted the mourning of a famous and well-compensated actress. An actress like that could possibly afford to keep an African lover. The persistent suitors are known to send flowers and gifts to the actresses, also in modern times that would be considered stalking and disapproved. For those who are interested in modern tabloids, there is a list of famous actresses and actors who married or cohabitated with wealthy suitors. The 19th century France was not that different in that regard. The persistent attention of a wealthy suitor would be a reason for jealousy by a secret black lover, as the actress he is living with is seen with a contemplation on her face in Olympia. That contemplation is nothing good for her black lover. What needs to be noted is the highly speculative nature of the suggestions from this slide. Édouard Manet left no hints about anything like that, but he could not possibly predict the 21st century's power of the internet. The frontal assault of the internet with search with keywords like actress, Olympia, 19th century, and France brought out a singular result that fits the hypothesis laid out in the previous slide. Introducing, with the help of Wikipedia, Aimée Desclée, born in Paris, November 16, 1836 to March 8, 1874, a French actress, recognized for her performances in contemporary French emotional plays. She acted with success in London and also performed in Belgium and Russia. She was reviewed as one of the best actresses of her time and was romantically linked to many famous artists of the day. At this point I do not know if she ever played part of Desdemona, or if Édouard Manet extrapolated. But she definitely had a very interesting personal life, as her love letters were published as a book, decades after her death. Her grave had a bust of her made by a famous sculptor, and she is as close as it gets to the modern-day celebrity, well worth the attention of Édouard Manet. At the time of painting Olympia, in 1863, Aimée Desclée would be 27 years old, at the peak of her career. It looks like Olympia was not a generic name chosen at random. Édouard Manet had yet one more laugh at the expense of a prudish and unsuspecting public. This slide is dedicated to a couple of odd things that could be relevant. Olympia, depicted with her left shoe off. That could be an allusion to the famous painting by Jean-Honoré Fragonard, 1732–1806, The Swing, about 1767–68, oil on canvas, The Wallace Collection, London. It is commonly accepted that The Swing is a testament to flirtation. Another visual clue is a side-by-side facial comparison between the woman depicted in Olympia and the face of Aimée Desclée. While not an exact match, those two depictions present a number of similarities, just to add more credibility to the suspected match discovered 150 years after the fact.